Hello and welcome to episode 30 of the TRUUMAN Podcast, the podcast designed to create a generation of self-defined men. Today, I'm joined by Daniel Glyde. Daniel, thank you so much for being with me today.
Delighted to be here, Lewis. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thanks for coming on. And as always, Daniel, I'll start with the most important question. In your own words, what makes you a man?
So what makes me a man is by birth, really. That's the body I was born into, and the gender that was assigned to me. What makes me a man, as I've developed through my life, is being authentically who I am and using my masculine qualities to make a mark on the world and to make it a better place. So that's what I feel defines me as a man these days. I have a very clear set of values and a very clear set of priorities. I have some masculine drives to create and to provide and to protect and all those things. So I've set up my whole life in order that I could do that. So I currently live up in the hills of the Scottish borders. I've got 12 acres of land. And the idea is to be self-sufficient and sustainable so I can provide for myself and for my family in a way that doesn't negatively impact the planet. And I also work as a transformational coach these days. And the idea with that is to help other men do the same, to be able to step into their authenticity, to be able to understand what their values are and to then prioritize that in their life. You know, I want to make the world a better place. And my mission these days is to do that one bloke at a time.
Amazing. Well, you sort of touched on it a little bit, but would you like to go into a little bit more detail in regards to what it is that you do and the work that you do with men?
Yeah, I'd love to. So my company's called Positive Masculinity, Lewis, and I set that up a couple of years ago, although I've only really been coaching people full time for just over a year now. And the idea it was kind of in reaction to the toxic masculinity thing. Now, I burnt out and broke down in 2018 because I was chasing professional success at all costs. So I sacrificed far too much of myself and who I was and far too much of my own well-being in order to get there. And I realized that some of the reasons why that happened is because I was following a very prescribed idea of what it meant to be a man. And I realized that parts of my upbringing and some beliefs that I had about myself because of my gender caused me to do myself harm. So I spent a few years rebuilding myself, developing myself, and changing all that, looking at my own beliefs, looking at all the things that were causing me to do myself harm. And I realized that I developed a process through which I realized I could take other men. And I looked at the world as it was right now, and I could see a problem with men and for men, a mental and emotional health problem. Because the biggest thing for me was self-reliance, Lewis. That's what drove me to burnout. Was I never ever ever asked for help. I thought I can do everything myself. I can cope with everything myself. And I had really poor mental and emotional health for a long time, probably for about 10 years, and it got steadily worse and worse. But I had no idea that's what was going on for me. I had chronic anxiety for a long time. I had bouts of depression. I was pretty much permanently stressed for a few years. But I thought that was normal. I thought, well, this is what it is to be a man chasing success in a high-powered. I worked in broadcasting for 20 years, and I was pretty good at it. And I just thought this is how it is for men. This is normal. I looked around me and I saw so many people going through the same thing. We never talked about it, but I could see it. I could see we were, all chasing professional success, all at the expense of our own well-being, and that was okay, right? Because that's what we do. That's what blokes do. And so I figured. So when I slowed my life right down, got really clear on who I wanted to be, and therefore what I wanted to create in the world, I realized that I was in a unique position where I was able to help other men. So I left the BBC. I took voluntary redundancy. I got really decent payout for that during COVID when they had to make cuts. And I invested all that money in myself. So in various personal development and personal growth courses. I took 2 coaching courses. I learned neuro-linguistic programming. And then eventually, so I still worked in TV, and I still do occasionally as a freelance contractor. And whilst I was doing that, I started building up my coaching business. And I realized that for every man that I can help to be their authentic self, to realize what they really want from life, and not just stuff, not just status, which is what the culture tells us we should be chasing. For every man I can help, I'm impacting 50, 100 more lives. You know, these guys' kids and their families, and the people I tend to work with, Lewis, are business owners and leaders. So, you know, they've got hundreds of employees and teams that work for them. For every guy I can help get real positive mental and emotional fitness, there's a ripple effect.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you're called Positive Masculinity, right? And you're talking about masculinity and what you went through. It'd be really good to get your idea of toxic masculinity, because I don't think it is in line with the media's masculinity.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. See, when I first heard this term, Lewis, which was, you know, probably about 7, 8 years ago now, and I thought, wow, they've hit on something here. Yes, we've created this culture, we've created this thing for men that is harmful not only for them and for individuals, but for society. We've created these self-reliant men who don't talk about their emotions. In fact, it's actively discouraged. So we don't express our emotions. We repress our emotions. We bury them. We ignore them. The only emotion we're allowed to express is anger. So you can imagine the damage that does. And it's all, for me, toxic masculinity is about division. It's about not liking or appreciating anything that's different from me. And in fact, not only doing that, it's about ridiculing it and not accepting it. So different sexualities, different ethnicities, and of course, women. And it's about power and dominance, which over people, not with people. So it's not about collaboration. It's not about working with people. It's not about accepting. It's all the opposite to that. And for me, that's what toxic masculinity is. And it's forcing men into a very narrow way of being, for which most men don't fit. You know, some of it, some men do. And what we've got to realize when we use a phrase like toxic masculinity, this is not a thing to beat men over the head with. Men are the victims here, right? The whole of society are too. But this is a path we follow. This is behavior we've seen modeled from generations before, of being tough, of being strong, of pushing through, of this idea of resilience being that you man up and that you carry on and that you ignore the fact that your body's telling you to slow down and stop and rest and relax. We don't do that because that's not what men do. We carry on, we push on through, we work 80 hours a week, we don't sleep. And we drink to excess, and we do everything to excess, and we celebrate it in a kind of boorish way. That to me is toxic masculinity. And that's not to say men are toxic. Men are not toxic. This is a set of behaviors that as a culture we no longer want, because we can see they're not effective. We can see they are harmful. This is not a stick to beat men with. This is not because we don't like masculinity. This is not because we want men to all be more feminine. We don't. We need strong men. We need masculine energy. We need creators, providers, risk takers, all those things that men bring to the table, problem solvers. We need to celebrate that in a positive way. Now, and what we don't want is dominance and control. I hear a lot of guys, and they're very confused, Lewis. They say, you know, Dan, I want to protect and provide for my family, but I don't think I'm allowed to say that anymore. Yes, you are allowed to say that, and yes, you are allowed to do that, but not in a way that means you harm anybody else. If you're not doing anybody any harm, if you're not trying to dominate anybody or control anybody or have power over anybody, then you're allowed to provide for your family. If you're not trying to make your wife stay at home and tell her what she can and can't do, you're allowed to protect and provide for your family. In fact, that should be celebrated if that's what men want to do. Well, we live in a culture now, Lewis, where there's lots of different ways in which we live our lives. Families look very different to the prescribed idea of what a family looked like 30, 40 years ago. But that doesn't mean that you can't still celebrate a man and a woman married with two children in that traditional way. If that's how people want to live, that's absolutely fine. And it does my head in when I hear blokes say, "Oh, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that anymore," because they think that's toxic masculinity. It bloody isn't.
No, yeah, no, it's about harnessing it, right? I think masculinity naturally is overpowering because it is hormones and it's just science. I don't want to bore people with that part of things, but it's about honing that and having control over that and channeling it, like you say, into the right areas.
Because men are naturally, and this is a sweeping statement, I get it, and it's not all men, and I know some women are too, just to add that caveat. But men are naturally assertive. We're naturally aggressive. We naturally take risks. But we need that in our culture. We need that. We need that to get things done, to get things built, to get things made. We need that. But what we don't need is dominance and control, because it doesn't work.
Yeah. So I guess my question to you is, there's this side of the coin, right, which is masculinity, and then there's the other side of it, which is burnout or suicidal thoughts or aggression and those side of things, and the sort of the mental health side of things.
Yeah.
What do you see are the differences in that, and how do they sort of combine, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that toxic masculinity leads to is really poor mental and emotional health. It leads to a real lack of self-awareness. So it's Mental Health Awareness Week at the moment, Lewis. Yeah. And the thing that really annoys me about Mental Health Awareness Week, I think it's great, right? We have these things and we talk about them. And then we tell men, oh, there are safe spaces and you should talk to each other and open up. And yet we should. But I think a lot of the guys I talk to and a lot of the guys I work with do not know or understand what poor mental health is. Yeah. As we were saying earlier on, some of these things are worn as a badge of honor. Oh, I didn't sleep a wink last night worrying about this thing I've got to do. That is poor mental health.
Yeah.
If you're irritable and losing your temper a lot, that is poor mental health. If you've got digestive problems and drinking a pint of Gaviscon every day after you've had something to eat, that is because of poor mental health. And this is the information I don't see out there. Yes, we have to talk. Yes, we have to open up. Yes, we've got to stop this self-reliance thing, because self-reliance doesn't work. We're humans. We're social animals. We're meant to help and support each other. And men, yes, we've got to find better ways of talking and not just connecting and communicating around sport and all the ways we normally do. And we do need to encourage that, and we need places for that. But really, we need, as a culture, to understand what poor mental health is, what not being aware of your emotions and your feelings does to you as a person. For years, Lewis, I buried my emotions, I repressed them, I did anything to avoid feeling bad. With drinking too much, taking drugs, eating way too much food, using porn, gambling, anything to give me short-term pleasure. And I know a lot of blokes that do the same. And only because we have no language or no tools to describe how we're feeling. And we've been brought up to believe big boys don't cry. So we're not allowed to be sad. That has to be expressed as anger. So we build up all these emotions and all these feelings that we repress and we bury and we avoid. They don't go anywhere. It's energy, emotion. It doesn't go anywhere. So if we don't deal with it, if we don't process it in the moment and as it happens in a healthy way, it's going to come out in an unhealthy way. And this is why you end up with men involved in violence and things like that, because that's all a load of pent-up energy and emotion that hasn't gone anywhere. And we don't have the tools to talk about it. We don't have the language to talk about it. we're not taught emotional awareness or understanding or intelligence. We don't understand ourselves. We don't understand that it's okay to feel sad. We're allowed to cry. It's a perfectly natural and normal thing to do. In fact, it's a great way to let go. But I feel like I'm quite a self-aware and emotionally intelligent guy, Lewis. But if I feel a lump in my throat, my natural instinct is to fight it back because that's what I've been taught. Big boys don't cry, and I'm a tough, strong man, right? So yeah, I don't get sad. That's bollocks. We do get sad, and it doesn't matter how tough or strong or how masculine we are. It's quite natural and normal to feel that way. But the more we bury it, the more we ignore it, and the lack of understanding, the worse it's going to be for our mental and emotional health. The more it's going to cause us stress, and it's going to cause us anxiety, and the more it's going to take us away from who we genuinely are, because we're not thinking machines. We are emotional beings that think.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I still stand by this, and I really want to get your thoughts on this. I believe having this discussion is really privileged, one, but I also think that being able to talk about your mental health is also a really privileged position. Like, you and I are in a really privileged position right now to have this conversation.
Absolutely, we are, mate. Yeah.
And you're talking about all of those things. So let's have a question in regards to what do you think's needed to sort of bring, I guess, without beating around the bush, lower economic parts of the UK and the world to start to have these conversations. What do you think's needed in that space?
We need leaders, Lewis. And we live in a capitalist world, right? So most people work. So those working guys, it's their companies and the corporations, I think, that need to be providing places and the means and the education to get them talking and opening up. And it's all about well-being. And for the corporations, you're going to have much better employees if you invest time, energy, and effort in their well-being. So we need an education piece first. So those guys, you're right. You and I are in a privileged position. I live up in the hills in the Scottish Mountain. I have plenty of time to look at myself and work on myself. A lot of people don't, and especially working guys, they don't, because they have to do a lot of hours in order to get some food on the table for themselves and their families. So yeah, it's got to be the companies and the corporations that have got to be educating them and providing support and helping them to understand what poor mental health looks like, why they need to talk about it, and then we need places for them where they can talk about it. And it's got to be places that they want to go. So for a kickoff, don't call them safe spaces, because I've never met a man who said to me, Dan, I need a safe space. We don't, right? Now, yeah. I think I watched that Danny Dyer documentary recently, and they talked about a third place, right? A place where guys can get together. And that's what we need. And we need to stop this attitude that men aren't allowed to get together in groups to talk and, like we're excluding people. We're not, right? There are problems here that we've talked about today that are particular to men, and men need a place where they can be vulnerable, where it's okay, where they're going to be supported, where they're not going to be judged, where they're not going to feel less than, where it's not all backslappy and matchy and gym bro, and we feel, because for years, Lewis, I felt like I couldn't tell anybody. I couldn't, because I thought it came across as weak. If I'm suffering, that's weak. And I think especially for working guys who are working hard day in, day out, they don't want to be seen as weak by their, fellow employees and stuff like that. So we've got to change the conversation a bit here, and we've got to provide places where it's normal for us to go and talk about how we're doing, where it's normal for us to go and talk about our emotions. We've got to start giving these guys the language, right? And maybe we talk about it in terms of sporting analogies or, things that are going to resonate with men and men can understand and then apply to themselves. And we've got to start giving guys real practical tips of what they can do for their own mental health. And we need to stop a lot of the rubbish that's out there. You know, I talk to a lot of guys and I say, how do you manage stress? And they say, well, I'll go for a run.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, okay. So I understand, I know where that information comes from. It does make you feel better to go for a run. But actually, if you think about your physiology, you're under stress, you go for a run, that's just putting more stress on the stress. Now, physical exercise and movement is absolutely one part of the equation, but there's a lot more of it to that. And we've got to be able to talk about things like mindfulness and stuff in a way that's accessible to men and doesn't make them think, oh, this is woo-woo bullshit and it means nothing. You've got to understand what that means and what it means for you and your mind and how you live your everyday life.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, and I would love to get your opinion on this as well, is I think men need to talk is the biggest load of bollocks going. Men will talk and they will always find a way to talk. Originally, it was after a few beers that you get a beer, like everyone's your mate when you've had a few beers or you've snorted some drugs. Like you're happy to talk, no problem whatsoever. I don't think the issue has ever been talking. It's about being when that conversation's had. But I think what's really important, and I think what puts off a lot of men about opening up and talking, like you say, terminology, safe space, it's like, cool, I can talk all day, but what's it going to do? Like, like it creates vulnerability, it makes you feel weaker. And there's like, well, I've told everyone now what? Everyone knows that I'm in shit. Like,
yeah, great. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, Lewis. It's support, isn't it? It's that next stage. Yeah, and I think you're right. You know, it's what do we talk about? It's not just that, you know, because men do talk, and you know, I talk for England and always have, and I've never had a problem with talking. I've never had a problem talking and connecting with other blokes. I've done that all my life. But it's changing the perception, Lewis, isn't it, of what is and isn't considered to be weak, and actually that it's strong to open up and to be vulnerable and to say, I'm suffering and I'm going through something here. But then we need a process. We need some steps that guys can say, okay, right, so I've done that, I've opened up and I've said, right, now I'm not feeling great. So what happens next, right? So, well, the next step is perhaps some sort of therapy or some sort of counselling or some sort of coaching. And that's why I've set my business up the way I have. Because lots of people will say to me, oh, why do you just coach men? It's like, because I am a man and I see some specific problems to men. So I've set up my process for men because I know how to talk to men. I know the language that men understand. And I know the things they go through because I am one, right? And that's what we need. We need more of those sort of things, Lewis, set up by men for men that aren't using these wanky phrases like safe spaces, they're using language that appeals to men. You know, one of the things I talk about is high performance, right? For me, high performance means mental fitness, it means good mental health. Now, I don't talk about it in terms of mental health because I don't believe that appeals to men. I talk about high performance. So, how can you get the best out of yourself? How can you optimize your mind? And I think these are the things we need to talk about, and these are the things we need to offer men. And so we can say, you can live your best life, you can live an epic life, you can go out and you can change the world and leave a legacy and create a mark. And that's how you have good mental health. By because that's what we're driven to do, aren't we, as men? We're driven to create and we're driven to provide and all those things. So let's give men a process that helps them do that, helps them understand how they can optimize their mind for high performance, because that will appeal to men. Talking about mental health won't.
Yeah, it's right. I think for me, it's talking's one thing, the solution's the other thing. But it's interesting what you've just sort of touched on there. So let's sort of revisit where you're living now, right? You're living in the Scottish borders, bit of land, lots of things like that. Arguably, not the traditional idea of success. So you've reframed what success looks like for you and what providing looks like for you and what support looks like for you. What do you think men can do now to reframe their idea of success? Because the current idea of success is, let's put it bluntly, shite on social media. So how do you reframe that?
Yeah, so the current idea of success is all material and status based, and particularly for blokes, right? And so what all I can do really here is what I've done for myself and what I do with my clients, Lewis. And the first stage is to get clarity, is to get really clear on what you care about, and most importantly, why you care about it. So we spend our whole lives living by these set of rules that's provided by society, following this path. And the guys I work with tend to be really successful blokes, Lewis, but they're not happy. They've got the big house and the big car, all the things that society says this is success. You know, they wear the Rolex watch, the designer suits, but they're bloody miserable because there's no meaning in it. You know, as fellas, we're looking for meaning and for purpose. And in order to know what your purpose is and to find meaning, you need to have a very clearly defined set of core values. And you do that by finding out who you are, and you know what you care about and why you care about it, and that then you then can prioritize that in your life, and you can decide for yourself what looks like success. So for me, success was being sustainable. It was being able to live the life I want to live and have freedom, but in a way that doesn't negatively impact the planet and doesn't negatively impact other people. Now, that might not be what's for everybody, but that was what was for me. So then I went about and used my masculine qualities to make it happen. And you know, I understand I'm in a privileged position to be able to do that. But the important thing is to find out what's in your heart, you know, and again, that's all about how you feel, Lewis, and it's your feelings that are the clue here, because whatever lights you up, whatever makes you feel alive, whatever you're passionate about, there's the clue. That's what you really care about. And then when you understand that, you can define what success means for you. Success means for me, Lewis, to have a healthy body, a clear mind, and a healed heart. That for me is success. I don't care how much stuff I've got. I don't care how much money I've got. I don't care what other people think of me. I don't care about having any sort of status. That's all I care about. And that I'm in a position where I can help and serve other people, because that's what's important to me. And that's success. And what you can't do, and what you shouldn't do if you want to be authentic yourself, is take an idea of success that's prescribed by somebody else.
Yeah, it's I always have this idea of like a Black Mirror episode where if you will go down the street, you can see like a meter, and I call it an equity meter. So you can see how much equity people have in the things that they actually own. And then I think everyone's perception of success would change so quickly. It would be hilarious, because obviously for keeping up with the Joneses, they may have two sports SUV vibes on the drive, but how financed are they, and how big's the mortgage on the house, and all of these things. And then all of a sudden, they wouldn't look as successful to you as they might do on the face of it, which I always sort of see.
Yeah, because it's all a facade, isn't it, Lewis? And that's the thing with and it's perpetuated these days by social media. This facade we put on, these personas we create, and I think us blokes are particularly good at it or bad at it, whichever way you want to look at it. But creating all these personas, our corporate persona, our persona for at home, our persona for down the pub, our persona for the football team. And the more you create those things and those masks, the less you are being yourself and the further away from yourself you're getting. And you're living your life and you're defining your success according to what somebody else says.
Yeah. What is you touched on it a bit, but like, how would you start to reframe your mind or give sort of advice to someone listening where, let's say, career is the hardest thing to change, right? You've got dependents, you're in a position where you have to work, you have to do that earning, and that's your job, and you've set that out as your stone. But you want to find purpose and happiness elsewhere. How do you start to give people the freedom to think about that?
Yeah, so the thing that really holds people back is their belief system, Lewis. And we create a belief system which operates in our kind of subconscious and pre-conscious mind. I'm not a psychologist, so I can't always explain this stuff very well. But we create it when we're younger, so when we don't really have much life experience. And again, we kind of take it in from the outside world, so from our upbringing, from our education, from our religion, from what we read, from what we see, what we hear. And when we're children, we're very naive, and we take meaning from things that happen to us. We all get traumatized, and I'm not just talking about abuse and neglect here and horrible trauma, but we all get traumatized by things that happen to us that leave us conflicted and confused, and we take that to mean something about ourselves. So we're all full of all these limits, all these things we've never questioned, so we believe them to be fact. So when I work with guys, that's one of the first things I do. Once we've built out their vision of what they want for their life, we look at what's stopping them, the can'ts and the shoulds and the have tos and the ought tos and the musts. Now, if you're using any of that language ever to describe what you think about yourself, what you think about the world, and why you're doing what you're doing, that's a big clue that you're putting a limit on yourself. So I think that's what we need. We need absolute clarity. That first step we talked about already of who we are, what we care about, and why. Then what's getting us in our way? So yeah, you've got a job that pays your bills, that provides for your family. What else have you got in your life? What lights you up? What are you passionate about? And what are you telling yourself that's stopping you from doing that? That's stopping you from picking up the guitar? That's stopping you from learning a martial art? That's stopping you from going and playing football with your friends? That's stopping you from going and trying out open water swimming or paddle boarding or surfing or all these things you've wanted to do all your life, but you think you don't have the time for? Then when you can work out the beliefs you've got that are stopping you, you can change them. And I would recommend that if you're in a privileged position like Lewis and I, go and get some help with that. Go and pay a professional, get some therapy, get some counselling, work with a coach, get someone who can help you, because it's really hard to, we all have these blind spots and it's really difficult to figure it out by yourself. And my favourite question, Lewis, that I always give to my clients to ask themselves is, everything you do in your life, we all live our lives by habit and routine. It's an efficient way to live. We love structure. Because that gives us freedom, bizarrely, which seems counterintuitive. But ask yourself, look at your habits, right? Look at what you do every day, how you spend your time. Because lots of guys always tell me, I don't have time, Dan, I don't have time. And it's like, you do have time, you just don't have a clear set of priorities. Look at all your habits and ask yourself, for what purpose? For what purpose am I doing that? What's the end game? What am I trying to achieve? What feeling am I trying to extract from life? Because that's what we're all doing. We're trying to extract emotional values in everything that we do. And if that doesn't align to your vision, that clarity piece you've done first, to who you are, stop doing it. Stop spending time on it. Start looking at how you spend your time and block time out so that you can carve out time for the things that you really love, the things that light you up, for yourself. Men particularly, we really like time for ourselves. And when we've got, when we're all, we're so busy these days, a lot of guys are not getting time for themselves. Even if it's just half an hour after work to just go for a little walk around the block by yourself and listen to your favorite podcast or whatever that is. Make time in your day for yourself every day, because not only do you deserve it, the people around you deserve it. And follow your feelings. Your feelings will tell you what you like to do. The things that you do where time appears to stop and you're not thinking about anything else, you're just there and you're fully in the moment. For me, it's swimming in open water, or used to be playing football, but I'm getting a bit long in the tooth for that now, or going out for a run in my valley. It makes me feel alive. And so I make sure I schedule time in my diary to do it. And it's non-negotiable, Lewis. It does not get shifted for anything apart from emergencies.
Yeah. I was looking at my analytics before we jumped on this podcast to see what age group was listening, and I stumbled across something that was quite interesting. It's actually around 50-50 listeners, male and female. And I would really like to take what you've just said, sort of take that opportunity to have that conversation that you just said there about, like, it's a non-negotiable and those sort of things. Either A, to encourage a partner that might be seeing their man or their brother or their son or whatever to have that conversation with them and say, like, this is what you need. But also, if you're a man, that it's okay to have that conversation with your partner, because as you said at the very beginning, what being positive and doing these things is going to have a huge effect on a number of people, right?
Yeah, and I would encourage fellas not to make assumptions. Don't, we all think we're amazing mind readers. Don't assume that your wife's going to go nuts when you suggest that you take half an hour for yourself, especially if you approach it from the point of view, this is for my mental fitness, and so I can live a high performance lifestyle, so I can be the best husband and dad I can be. I just need half an hour at the end of the workday to unwind and let go. Then I can come home and be really present with you guys. I can be here and I'm not picking up the phone and answering emails, and I'm not brought in all the stress from the day. Yeah, don't make assumptions, and don't judge yourself either. Don't judge yourself harshly. If don't there might be some weird and wonderful things you want to do or you want to try out. Don't judge yourself. Go and give it a go. And yes, absolutely, I would encourage wives and partners and fiancés to encourage their fellas to do this, because it's amazing for your mental health and your mental fitness if you can just have that. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time, but just a bit of time. And it's a mindfulness thing, Lewis. That's what it is. That's what it's about. It's about just having that bit of time where you're not thinking about work, where you're not thinking about the kids, where you're not thinking about what you've got to do and what you've got to get done. You're just there and you're in the moment and you're being yourself and you're doing something that makes you feel alive.
And I think the open communication is only going to be beneficial for that relationship, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a no-brainer. If you're doing these things secretively, it might be seen as you're doing something a bit naughty that you might not want to your partner.
Yeah, and that's where the assumption comes in, Lewis, isn't it? And I get it, because there are relationships where there are always a bit of give and take and to in and throw in, and your wife or partner might be saying to you, oh, I need you to step up and do a bit more here and a bit more there. And you think to yourself, well, what's she going to say if I now say I want to go and do an hour's paddleboard in a week? She's never going to like that. So I'll tell you what, I'll tell her that I've got to stay behind at work. I've got to do a bit of overtime. I've got a meeting and I'll sneak off and do it. Do not do that because that is just storing up trouble. And also it's storing up trouble for you, because you'll be there on that paddleboard and you'll be thinking, shit, she finds this out, I'm going to be in trouble here, and this is going to cause a problem. And then if you start lying, then you're going to have to tell another lie, and then another lie, and then another lie. And no, yeah, that's never good. It's always got to be about open communication. And even if you go to your wife or partner, and the initial reaction is a bad one, they might go, "What? You haven't got time for that." That's a possibility, right? But I guarantee you that you give her a bit of time to let it sink in. Don't make it a confrontation. Don't make it a fight. You put your side across. You leave it at that. Then when things have come down, go back and talk again. I guarantee your wife or partner will be receptive.
Yeah, I also think that big long list of things, so that fence that needs painting, that shelf that needs putting up, that door that's off its hinges, if you ironically spend half an hour doing something that clears your mind, you're more inclined to do that in the evening anyway. So
absolutely, yeah. Well, that's it. If you've got somewhere where you can just let all that stress go, you can do something mindful. And yeah, so this weekend, Lewis, right? I told you earlier on today, I've not been well. I've had man flu for a week, and it's terrible for us guys when we get ill. I was on my deathbed for a couple of days. But so this weekend, I thought to myself, right, it's a beautiful week. It was a beautiful weekend weather-wise, and I like to grow all my own food these days. But I thought, I'm not going to set myself up for a load of stuff to do, because I've not got a lot of energy. I need to rest, so I'm just going to rest. And if I feel I've got the energy, I'll do a few bits. I got shitloads done, mate. I planted 3 builders bags of potatoes and 5 sacks, and a whole bed of vegetables. I planted carrots and turnips and radishes. because I didn't have a to-do list. I didn't write this job. Oh God, I didn't see any of it as a chore,
Yeah.
and therefore I did it quite happily and quite naturally. And I got loads done just because I took the pressure off myself. So, and yeah, to the women and girls out there, if you can take the pressure off your fella, he will get a lot more done.
Nice. And then I guess finally, what do you think is needed more of, or what's missing in the space for men?
What do we need more of? I think we need less of this chat about how men are under attack, about how masculinity is somehow toxic, because it seems to have flipped that script now, right? It's not toxic masculinity, it's somehow the masculine. We need to change the conversation there. We need to give men the tools and the support and the language to talk about how they feel in a way that's comfortable for them. We need to stop using phrases like soft skills when it comes to things like compassion and empathy, because they're not soft skills, they are strong skills, and they are things that men have and do naturally, and we don't need to be telling them they're soft skills, because that's not going to appeal to men. Yeah, I mean, we need to talk about these things in language that men get, in a way that's going to motivate them to want to do something, that isn't just platitudes, that isn't just ticking boxes. And we need to see some leaders. We need to see some guys standing up and saying this stuff. Guys who've got a platform and got a profile, celebrating what it is to be a man and what it is to be an authentic man who knows himself and wants to make the world a better place, because that's what our essential drives are as blokes. That's what we're here to do in our creative, protective way, and that stuff has got to be allowed. We've got to change this conversation, and this thing about somehow trying to feminize men. That's not a productive thing. We've figured out it in our strive for equality and equity that we don't want women to be men. Yeah, we don't want any barriers to opportunity. We don't want prejudice. We don't want discrimination. We want everybody to be able to live the life they want to live. And whatever that is, if you're not doing any harm, that's okay. We don't want dominance and we don't want control. But other than that, we want to celebrate everything it means to be a man. And we need some leaders doing that, because men are feeling marginalized, men are feeling under attack. And there is some weird conversations going out there that are really just not helpful for anybody, and are making men withdraw even more. And we don't want that. But men aren't really under attack. They feel like they are. And the fact they feel like they are is a problem. And it's a problem we need to talk about. There's no war going on. That's something else I heard in the Daniel Glyde document. There isn't a war against men, but men feel like there is. So we've got to talk about that. We can't just brush that off and ignore it and pretend it's not happening. We've got to have these conversations. We've got to stop marginalising men. Imagine what this is doing for the generation of young lads that are coming through now, and they're seeing all this stuff on social media and hearing it and reading it, and they're turning into some dangerous people, Lewis. The likes of Andrew Tate. These aren't the people we want leading the conversation. We want loving, compassionate, strong, brave men leading this conversation. That's what we need.
Dan, I would love to talk to you for hours and hours. You're clearly really passionate about that. Where can people find you if they want to know more or find out a little bit more about what you do?
My website is not quite launched yet. So the best place to find me at the moment is LinkedIn. But if you search online, Dan Glyde Coach or Positive Masculinity, you ought to be able to find me. But yeah, LinkedIn's the best place to find me. I post every day. I chat to lots of people on there. And that's really where my coaching company kind of exists at the moment. I'm about to launch a website, and I've got all sorts of other plans. I'm fairly new at all this at the moment. I'm only just a year in. But yeah, LinkedIn is definitely the best place to find me at the moment.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's genuinely appreciated. And thank you.
Delighted, Lewis. Thanks for having me on.